From an early age, we are taught that happiness is a destination. It is believed that after earning a diploma, landing a stable job, having the perfect marriage, and owning a home, happiness will finally arrive. But those who have gone through each of these stages have realized something unsettling. Happiness, like the horizon line, retreats with every step taken toward it. It is a seductive, yet unattainable promise. And the most curious part, most people keep believing in it, as if it's just a matter of trying a little harder, tweaking a detail here and there. But is there something fundamentally wrong with this logic? Albert Camus exposes this illusion. To him, life doesn't come with an instruction manual or a final destination waiting to be reached. The idea that there is a fixed point where everything will finally make sense is a misconception that traps more than it frees. How many times have you thought, once X happens, then I'll be happy? But as soon as you achieve X, another goal emerges, then another. Until when? The relentless pursuit of this idealized happiness only leads to frustration and exhaustion because it ignores an uncomfortable truth. Life is not a problem to be solved, but an experience to be lived. Even worse, this obsession with happiness as a goal causes many people to ignore the present. The mindset always becomes, when I have more money, or when I meet someone special. But while this hypothetical happiness remains out of reach, real life is happening. Small moments of joy go unnoticed because they don't fit into the happily ever after narrative. And the most alarming part? This mentality can consume decades without the person ever realizing that there never actually existed. Pop culture, advertising, and self-help books fuel the illusion that happiness is always just one step ahead. But what happens when someone achieves everything they ever wanted and still feels empty? Robin Williams is a striking example of this. Universally acclaimed, he made millions laugh and amassed fame, recognition, and fortune. Yet behind this success, he fought a silent battle, a reminder that external achievements cannot fill what is missing inside. Camus offers a different way to see life. What if happiness is not a destination, but something that arises in unexpected moments? What if the very pursuit of it is what prevents us from seeing those moments? Instead of chasing an unattainable ideal, what if we learned to recognize contentment along the way? Of course, accepting this idea isn't easy because it means letting go of many comforting illusions. And the biggest challenge, we live in a society that has turned immediate gratification into a temporary solution for the discomfort of existence. We exist in a world that has convinced us that being busy and constantly entertained equals happiness. Social media, binge-worthy series, impulsive shopping, and the never-ending flood of content promise to fill any emotional void. But do they really? Instant pleasure distracts, but it doesn't solve the root of the discomfort. When the dopamine fades, restlessness returns with force, and there we go again, searching for the next distraction. Camus warns us about this danger. He understood that a world built on instant gratification keeps us trapped in a false sense of fulfillment. Pleasure that comes easily also fades quickly. Eating sweets to relieve stress, making impulsive purchases, or endlessly scrolling through a feed might bring temporary relief, but it never lasts. The question no one asks is, why do we feel this constant need to be distracted? Many people are afraid of silence. Without filters, instant likes, or external validation, all that remains is us and our own thoughts. And that can be terrifying. That's why so many people can't go 10 minutes without picking up their phone. But what Camus teaches us is that the emptiness we desperately try to fill might actually have something to say. The discomfort we silence with distractions may be our true self trying to get our attention. A real-life example of this can be seen in what happens to many people who acquire wealth quickly. Who hasn't heard of someone winning millions in the lottery, only to end up broke and miserable a few years later? Money brought pleasure, but not purpose. The same happens to those who seek social acceptance at any cost. They accumulate followers, likes and compliments, but feel an emptiness every time their phone screen goes dark. If momentary pleasure doesn't sustain fulfillment, then what does? The answer may be uncomfortable because it's not found in what is easy and immediate, but in what is built with depth. Small pleasures have their place, but relying on them to give meaning to life is a dangerous mistake. And this is a subtle trap, because pressing a button to watch a new video is always easier than facing one's own emptiness. Humans crave answers. We are taught that life follows a plan, and that if we do everything right, we will be rewarded in the end. But reality doesn't always match that expectation. You can give it your all, and still, nothing turns out as planned. The problem is that no one prepares us for this. When we realize that the world does not operate based on what we consider fair, an internal conflict arises. If nothing has a guaranteed meaning, then what are we doing here? Camus calls this feeling the absurd. It is the clash between what we expect from life and what it actually delivers. We seek security, yet we live in an unpredictable universe. We search for purpose, but we find an indifferent world. And from this contrast, anguish is born. Think of the student who spends years studying to land their dream job, only to find the daily routine dull and unfulfilling. Or the couple who idealizes a perfect relationship, only to face the real challenges of coexistence. The greater the expectation, the deeper the disappointment. This frustration can lead to two paths. Some try to ignore the absurd and cling to any narrative that gives them a sense of control. Others fall into despair, paralyzed by the fear that nothing really matters. But there is a third option, facing reality as it is, without filters. Camus suggests that instead of resisting the absurd, we should embrace it. After all, the fact that life lacks a predefined meaning does not mean it is empty. On the contrary, it creates the freedom to shape our own meaning. If life's unpredictability is unsettling, think about how often something unexpected has led to something good. A chance opportunity, a meeting that changed your life, a mistake that turned into a valuable lesson. The absence of guarantees can be frightening, but it can also be liberating. The real question is this uncertainty a burden or an opportunity to live without constraints? Accepting the absurd doesn't mean giving up. It means understanding that life doesn't follow a script. You can plan, seek security, and give your best, but you will never have total control. And that doesn't have to be a bad thing. After all, if everything were predictable, where would the excitement be? The real question is not how to escape the absurd, but how to live fully despite it. And that is exactly what Camus explores in The Myth of Sisyphus, where the endless repetition of human existence becomes the central focus of reflection. Imagine spending your entire life pushing a boulder up a mountain, only to watch it roll back down every time you reach the top. It seems like a meaningless punishment, doesn't it? But is it really that different from what we do every day? Camus uses the myth of Sisyphus to illustrate human routine. We work, pay bills, face challenges, and then do it all over again the next day. But what keeps us going? Many people go through life on autopilot, repeating the same cycles without questioning them. But Camus invites us to look closer. What if meaning isn't found in the final destination, but in the act itself? Sisyphus, condemned to endless effort, could surrender to despair. But Camus challenges this view. What if instead Sisyphus accepted his task and found an unexpected satisfaction in it? Think of an artist who paints every day without any guarantee that their work will ever be recognized, or a teacher who educates generations of students, knowing that not all of them will appreciate their efforts. The value of these actions isn't in some grand conclusion, but in the act itself. If we accept that there is no ultimate ending that will bring eternal fulfillment, we can start seeing the beauty in the process. Every moment lived has its own significance, even if, from a distance, it appears to be just another repetition. Resistance to the absurd arises when we expect grand rewards to justify our efforts. We want hard work to guarantee success, relationships to last forever, life to follow a predictable logic. But what if, instead of chasing a final prize, we learn to find fulfillment in the act of living itself? When we stop waiting for life to hand us a ready-made purpose, we gain the power to create our own. The myth of Sisyphus doesn't have to be a condemnation. It can be a liberation. If every climb up the mountain holds meaning in itself, there is no longer a reason for frustration. And this is Camus' great realization. When we accept the absurd and move forward anyway, we become truly free. But this freedom does not come without its challenges. After all, what happens when we recognize that we are caught in a cycle and yet choose to keep going? Camus answers with a bold idea: revolt. If life has no predetermined meaning, then what's the next step? For many, this realization might seem discouraging, as if everything suddenly loses its value. But Camus presents a powerful alternative: revolt. Not a destructive revolt, but a conscious defiance. Instead of surrendering to despair or clinging to comforting illusions, a person can simply choose to live authentically, without needing the universe to validate their existence. The real trap lies in trying to find a meaning that fits perfectly into what we wish were true. Some people spend their lives waiting for a moment of enlightenment, for a great epiphany that will make everything make sense. But what if that moment never comes? Camus challenges us to let go of that illusion and take ownership of our own existence. Those who embrace the absurd do not search for a single, definitive truth. They create their own. Imagine someone who spent years trying to please others, seeking recognition, validating every step through the eyes of those around them. Suddenly, they realize that they will never be enough for everyone because society will always demand more. At that moment, there is a collision. Either they submit to this endless, empty pursuit, or they simply decide to live by their own rules. Camus' revolt is this act of freedom, the refusal to let the world dictate what should be meaningful. This acceptance makes room for something rare, an unrestrained and intense life. If there is no fixed script, why not explore existence with more freedom? Revolt does not mean rejecting joy or falling into absolute nihilism. On the contrary, it means living with more presence, more authenticity, without the burden of needing a final answer for everything. It's not about giving up on life. It's about seeing it with greater clarity. But there's an essential detail. This revolt does not make us immune to the mind's traps. Often, we seek refuge in comforting beliefs to avoid confronting the discomfort of the absurd. Faced with uncertainty, many try to fill the void with religion, social status, wealth, or excessive work. Camus does not condemn these choices, but warns about the danger of turning them into crutches. When an external explanation becomes the sole reason to keep going, a person risks living a convenient lie instead of facing the raw truth of existence. And the bigger problem arises when these beliefs are shaken. What happens when someone who dedicated their entire life to success realizes that deep down they are still dissatisfied? Or when a person who followed all the rules imposed by society still feels an emptiness? This realization can be devastating because, without that structure, they feel lost. But perhaps that is the best thing that could happen, because only when illusions collapse can something real be built. Many people shield themselves with the illusion that happiness depends on a future event. When I have financial stability, I'll be happy. When I meet the right person, everything will make sense. But Camus warns us that these certainties are fragile. This realization may be uncomfortable, but it is also liberating, because if nothing has a fixed meaning, why be bound by external expectations? True meaning isn't in what we achieve, but in how we choose to live. This explains why so many people who are considered successful by the world's standards still feel incomplete. Think of someone who devoted their entire life to work, sacrificing time, health, and relationships in pursuit of a grand goal. But upon reaching it, they realize that life remains the same. This is the reality of many who spent years believing they were on the right path, only to discover they were actually running away from themselves. The question that lingers is, to what extent do you truly believe in what you believe? How much of your convictions are genuinely yours and not just inherited from culture, society, or family? Camus invites us to challenge these certainties and face the discomfort of doubt, because only when we abandon these crutches can we begin to live without illusions. And one of the greatest illusions is believing that love can fill this void. But can it really? Popular culture sells the idea that love is the answer to all of life's dilemmas. Movies, music, books, all reinforce the narrative that finding the right person will solve any existential emptiness. But Camus is skeptical of this promise. Love can be an intense, profound, and transformative experience, but putting it on a pedestal as the ultimate solution is a mistake. Like everything else, love is also subject to impermanence. The problem arises when people believe that a relationship will be the missing piece in the puzzle of their happiness. How many times has someone thought, once I find the right person, my life will have meaning? But what happens when that relationship doesn't live up to expectations? Or when, after the initial euphoria, routine sets in and the same old anxieties resurface? This exposes an uncomfortable truth. No one can save another person from themselves. Many turn to love as an escape, seeking in another what they cannot find within. But this inevitably leads to frustration. No one is prepared to carry the weight of someone else's entire existence. Healthy relationships happen when two people share their lives, not when one expects the other to fill their inner voids. Love can be a refuge, but it cannot be the sole anchor of someone's existence. Camus does not reject love, but urges us to see it without illusions. Love can be beautiful, but it can also be chaotic. It can bring joy, but it can also bring suffering. It can unite two people, but it can also separate them for no apparent reason. Does this mean we shouldn't love? Quite the opposite. But we should love without expecting it to be more than what it truly is. When someone realizes that not even love can offer absolute meaning, a dilemma arises. What is left? If happiness is not a destination, if pleasure does not fulfill, and if love does not solve everything, then what is the way forward? For Camus, the answer lies in the freedom to accept the absurd and live without false hopes. If everything is uncertain, if life has no predetermined purpose, if the explanations we try to create are fragile, then what remains? For many, this conclusion might seem terrifying, but for Camus, it is liberating. Accepting the absurd does not mean giving up on life. It means living it more intensely and authentically. Instead of searching for guarantees that will never exist, one can simply choose to embrace each moment for what it is, without needing something greater to justify it. Freedom arises when we stop trying to fit life into a perfect mold. Think of someone who is always worried about the future. What if I fail? What if things don't work out? What if I'm not making the right choices? But what if, instead of being trapped by these doubts, that person simply moved forward, accepting uncertainty as part of the experience? Without the weight of expectations, there is more room to fully live in the present. Camus invites us to see life as a work of art in progress. A painter doesn't know exactly how their painting will turn out until it is finished. In the same way, existence does not follow a fixed script. Each choice, each experience, each moment contributes to a larger picture, but there is no need for it to have an absolute meaning. We can simply create, experiment, and explore, without waiting for a grand finale to validate everything. This completely changes the way we face challenges. If the absurd is inevitable, then there's no point in clinging too tightly to failures or successes. Everything is part of the same flow. Instead of suffering over what cannot be changed, we can focus on what is within our reach, how we choose to live each day. What would you do if you weren't waiting for a final reward? If there were no ultimate purpose to be achieved, how would you choose to live? This is where Camus gives his most provocative answer. Live without expecting life to give you something in return. There is no final destination, no consolation prize, no hidden truth waiting to be uncovered. And it is precisely this absence of guarantees that makes existence unique. The idea that happiness is a fixed destination is one of humanity's greatest misconceptions. How many times have we heard phrases like, "I just want to be happy," but what does that really mean? Camus exposes this illusion by arguing that happiness is not something to be obtained and held onto forever. It is a collection of fleeting moments, small, unexpected instances that arise and, for that very reason, should be appreciated. The problem is that many people see happiness as a destination. They believe that by achieving a certain status, stability, or relationship, they will finally feel complete. But that feeling never lasts. As soon as one goal is reached, another takes its place, perpetuating an endless cycle. The happiness they seek is not permanent. It reveals itself in the details: a spontaneous laugh, a song that gives you chills, a warm cup of coffee on a cold day. This perspective changes everything. Instead of feeling frustrated because happiness doesn't last, a person begins to recognize it when it happens. This doesn't mean settling for less, but learning to notice the beauty in what is already present. How many times have moments of happiness gone unnoticed because we were too busy waiting for something bigger? The great mistake is believing that we will only be happy when everything is perfect. But life will never be perfect, and yet it can still be incredible. Think of a moment when you truly felt at peace. Maybe it was during a trip, an unexpected encounter, or a personal achievement. What makes these moments special is precisely the fact that they are temporary. If they were eternal, they would lose their magic. This is what Camus teaches us. Happiness is not a permanent state, but something we find along the way. And this is the real shift. When we accept that happiness cannot be sustained indefinitely, we stop chasing it like a trophy. Instead, we learn to experience it in the present without anxiety. But not everyone is ready for this truth. After all, admitting that happiness is not what we were taught can be unsettling. And that is exactly the truth that few are willing to face. What Camus teaches us is not comforting. He forces us to confront reality without illusions, without reassuring promises, without guarantees that everything will make sense in the end. The truth that few want to admit is that happiness, as an ultimate goal, does not exist. But this realization should not be a cause for despair. On the contrary, it should be an invitation to live more freely and authentically. If there is no guaranteed destination, then every choice becomes even more meaningful. There is no need to wait for the perfect moment, the definitive answer, or the absolute meaning. What exists is the now, and within it lies everything that truly matters. The question is not, how can I be happy forever? But rather, how can I live more fully, knowing that nothing lasts. Camus challenges us to abandon the illusion that life needs to follow a perfect plan. Meaning is not found at the end of the road, but in the steps we take every day. Happiness is not a reward for good behavior, but an experience that happens while we are alive. And perhaps deep down, this is the greatest liberation we can achieve.